I've been using the iPhone 15 Pro Max since launch, and in today's video I'm going to tell you how I killed it, completely fried the motherboard and got it replaced, and I'm going to share with you some of the pros and cons and just my overall experience. One of the best features of the iPhone 15 series is the addition of the USB Type-C port, but that is the feature that caused me to destroy my iPhone. So I plugged it in and went to bed, and when I woke up the next morning, I turned it on, I realized it wasn't charging. So I plugged in the charger again, then I saw the Apple logo, and then it completely shut off and it didn't turn on again ever. So I had to set an appointment with the Apple store and I brought it in. Ultimately, it couldn't be repaired, so they just gave me a brand new iPhone to replace it, which is good because if I bought a Samsung or something, I would have been stuck and I would have lost like $1,200. Now, before you start panicking, the chances of this happening to you are pretty much like very, very, very small. So my advice is to stick to USB power delivery cables and adapters. The charger I used actually came with a warning on it, but I didn't read that warning. I just got up in the night and I plugged it in. So the warning said don't charge any other devices with that cable because it came with a specific video light which I'm using to record this video from Coldbore. And yeah, so apparently the voltage and the total output was like 90 watts. It's way too much, so it killed the iPhone. So lesson learned, stick to power delivery cables and stuff like that. Normal USB power delivery adapters work just fine. For example, I charge it with my Nintendo Switch charger. It's a 45 watt. The chargers for the MacBooks, those are like 60 watts. They work just fine. As long as it's a USB power delivery spec, it will work. So there's no need to worry. The USB Type-C port and the 5x camera are the two main reasons why I went with the iPhone 15 Pro Max and pre-ordered it. The USB Type-C port implementation is very good, and I think Apple nailed it on their first attempt. So they're using 3.0 speeds, which means I can record ProRes video or log video right onto an external SSD or flash drive. ProRes video takes up a lot of storage, so you definitely need some form of external storage whenever you're using that. And my best accessory for the iPhone 15 series overall is this Samsung USB drive that I've been using. So this 256 gig version is like probably $20 on Amazon, I think, somewhere around that. And I can plug it directly into the iPhone, I can plug it into Android phones, I can plug it into Windows or Mac. So if you need to transfer files or stuff you're making content, this is a must-have in my opinion, and it beats carrying around a big external SSD. I connected the USB-C hub that I use on my MacBook. I plugged it directly into the iPhone, and from there I connected an external monitor, a flash drive, I plugged in SD cards, I plugged in a mouse, I connected a keyboard, and I connected controllers. So with that setup, you can run your iPhone as a desktop and get work done. You can type up documents in Google Docs or Microsoft Word. You can do spreadsheets, all that stuff. And another thing you could do is run it as a gaming setup. There are many games that support keyboard and mouse or controllers. So there's that. You can hook it up onto an external monitor and play some games. And with the recent releases of games like Resident Evil, like full PlayStation 5 level games, current gen games that are on the iPhone, you can run those games and this could be your gaming console. This could even work for emulators. So if you have emulators for like old Nintendo games, PSP emulators, stuff like that, this would make a killer setup. So the USB Type-C port is a huge win in my opinion. The cameras on the iPhone 15 series have been really solid overall. Since they jumped to that 48 megapixel sensor, the image quality is now so good. And the default is now 24 megapixels, so you get more details and stuff. And the ultra wide and the 5x camera, they're all very consistent between lenses. It's also really good in low light, and I've never really had an issue where I felt like it was lacking. But in the camera app, I think it's starting to get a bit too cluttered. For example, I find the 2x mode useful, the crop mode, but there's 1.2x crop mode and 1.5x crop mode, right? And those are kind of annoying, they just get in the way. So there are two things I really dislike about the cameras on the iPhone 15 series. Number one is the minimum focus distance is so poor. So whenever you focus close to something, it automatically switches to the ultra wide camera. For photos, it's fine. It is what it is. I wish I could just turn it off completely. But for video, it's even more annoying. And the only way around it is to physically cover the ultra wide sensor so it's disabled. And that will stick to the using the main sensor for your shots. The second thing is how it processes darker skin tones. This has been a thing over the last few years on iPhones where if it detects like dark skin tones, it cranks up the sharpness and it flattens out the contrast. So the skin tones end up looking dull. And recently I've started to see a few more YouTube channels covering this issue. If I can find a good one, I'm going to link it so you have a clear idea of what it is that I'm talking about. So for comparison, if you ever use a Pixel, you know that, if you're darker skinned like myself, the Pixel has something called real tone, which it captures your skin tone accurately. And I think it does a much, much better job. So Apple really needs to work on that and fix it. But until you find a lot more people talking about it, I'm guessing they just will ignore it. Battery life is really solid on the iPhone 15 Pro Max. You can pull off 8 hours screen on time relatively easily. And if you're a light user, you can stretch into 2 days with ease. I am not one to measure exact numbers and graphs and all that because everyone's usage is going to be different. But if you've looked at any battery comparisons on the internet, you're finding that the 15 Pro Max is just dominating. As you'd expect, the screen is amazing. Colors are vibrant, the 120 Hz refresh rate is good, and it still maintains some decent color accuracy. So if you're editing content or stuff like that, it's a really nice experience. The dynamic island is fine. It's not very useful. It's cool when it works, but outside of that, I don't have any issues with the screen on this. Before this, I used to think that high refresh rate was overrated. I've even used 90 Hz on the Pixels, and when I use this is the first time I actually started to notice it. And when I look at the regular iPhones, like the 15s, the 14s, without ProMotion, I really start to notice that stutter. It's not really a stutter, but it just lacks that smoothness that you find. So I'm a part of the high refresh rate club now, and it's kind of hard to go back. The one thing I really dislike about this screen is the screen dimming issue. This has been plaguing iPhones for a few years now, and it's still here, and I'm disappointed. So the iPhone has a really bright screen. I think somewhere like 1600 nits. Don't quote me, it's not exact, but it's very bright. But when you use your phone in the bright sunlight, that maximum brightness can only be sustained for like a few minutes, and then the screen dimming starts. So as soon as your phone starts to get hot, the brightness is cut like in half, and then if it gets even hotter, it's cut in half again. Like, what's the point of having a super bright display if out in the sun when you need it most is going to fail you? I don't get it. Now, related to that is the lack of a proper cooling system. So when this thing launched, there was a lot of complaints about overheating, which thankfully I've never experienced, except this one time. Actually, I was out in the sun. It was probably like 37 degrees Celsius, and I was recording some videos, and I was dying in the heat. So I could understand that the phone was overheating, like in that specific scenario. But Android phones have vapor chamber cooling. Some of them have fans. It's ridiculous, but they keep the phone cool. They do their job. And I think I've seen rumors that on the 16 series, Apple is engineering some sort of cooling solution in their phones. Finally, they need it. So I don't like the fact that it doesn't have a proper cooling system and it can run hot. If you're pushing it for gaming, for long sessions, which I don't play games on my phone anymore, it could get hot and overheat. Aside from the few issues I mentioned, this has been the best iPhone released in the last few years by far. I think Apple sort of refined this, and people complain that, oh, iPhones look the same, they're all the same. Not really. We're just at a point where all these phones are so good. Like, what can they really change year over year? It's just minor improvements, minor refinements, and I think this is one of the peak iPhones that we've had, over the last few years. I've usually been drawn to the smaller phones, but now I'm with the Pro Max and I don't want to go back to a smaller phone. I like the size, the weight, it's nice. I've held the 14 Pro Max and that thing felt like a brick, so this was actually refreshing to pick up. And as you can see here, I got the natural titanium, and the color is nice. It's been holding up well. I don't have any build quality issues, so there's that. The color options, they're kind of boring, but it is what it is. Now the question on everyone's mind, is it worth it? I would say no, not really. It's a solid phone, but come on, $1,200, it's kind of ridiculous, these phone prices. It's about the same as what you'd pay for a S24 Ultra, but they're all still too expensive in my opinion, And for most people, if you're not using the ProRes, the video recording, that kind of stuff, or even the 5x zoom, like, these things are nice to have. When I'm using my phone camera, 90% of the time, I'm only using the main camera anyways. So a few times I use the ultra wide, a few times I use the zoom, but you really don't need them. They're nice to have. And even stuff like 120 hertz refresh rate. Normal people don't care about that kind of thing. If their phone works and it works well, that's it, and it's fine. With that being said, my next phone is going to be a certain flagship killer. Yes, I'm switching back to Android for the time being. So let's see how that works out. And if you're interested in seeing videos about that, consider subscribing, joining my channel, and until next time, have a great day. Goodbye.